In this video, I'll be covering how I created this hexagon tile pattern and then set it into my existing hardwood floors as a transition from my kitchen floor to my dining room. In my kitchen remodel, I wanted to use the same charcoal gray hex tile with randomly placed deco tiles that we put in our entryway. But instead of doing a straight line transition from the tile to hardwood, I wanted to use a transition I'd seen online where the hex tiles flow into the hardwood for a staggered geometric effect. I found one video tutorial on YouTube, but in that video the homeowner installed the tile first and then cut his engineered hardwood to match up to the tile. This seemed to be the most common scenario for creating this effect, but in my case I already had our hardwood floors installed, so I would have to be cutting the hardwood floor and insetting the tiles. After considering many options, I decided that I first had to lay out my tile transition pattern onto the wood, trace it, and then cut the wood. Then I could lay down 1/4 inch HardieBacker board into the pattern on the subfloor and lay the tile on top of that. To begin, I started laying out the tile with spacers on top of the hardwood. Then I took a magic marker and traced the outline of the pattern onto the wood. The distance from the edge of the tiles to the far edge of the marker line was just about 1/8 of an inch, the same as my tile spacers. Once I had the pattern traced, I needed to summon my courage and start to cut the hardwood floor. After some tests with a couple of different tools, I settled on my Dremel oscillating tool with a round wood blade to make the straight cuts along the sides of the hexagons. This was a painstaking and pretty time-consuming process. After I finished all the cuts on the hardwood, it was time to cut my pattern into my 1/4 inch sheets of HardieBacker concrete board. To do this, I used a long piece of 36-inch wide butcher paper, laid it over the pattern that I cut into the floor, and used one of my kids' crayons to create an etching of the pattern. I then cut this out and used it to transfer the pattern onto the sheets of backer board. Once the backer board was cut and dry fit, I mixed up some modified thinset mortar and spread it onto the subfloor with my 1/4 inch notch trowel and laid down the backer board. And then I screwed it to the subfloor with 1 1/4 inch backer board screws according to the pattern printed on the board. And thank goodness for my impact drivers, I had to put a lot of screws into the backer board on this kitchen floor. Once the backer board was down, I used a mesh tape and a thin coat of mortar to fill the 1/4 inch seams between the sheets of backer board. Then it was finally time to set the tile. Once all the tile was set, it was time to grout. I used Custom Building Products Fusion Pro Sanded Grout and Pewter. I'd used this product a few times before, so I was familiar with how to work with it. It gives similar results to other epoxy grouts, but you have to work in really small areas at a time and clean off the tile often, as it gets really hard to remove from the surface of the tile once it starts to dry. The only areas I did not grout were the transitions from the tile to wood. For those grout lines, I used another Custom Building Products product called Sanded Ceramic Tile Caulk. I used painter's tape to cover both sides of the grout line along the transition, and then used a caulking gun to apply the grout and my finger to smooth the grout line. Then I immediately pulled up the tape to leave a nice sharp line that matched the tile grout lines nearly perfectly. As a side note, spend a few dollars on a nice quality caulking gun. Makes all the difference. The final step was to use some of the Fusion Pro grout to fill in some of the bubbles and gaps in the grout, and to fill in some small gaps between the grout and the caulking. Once everything was dry, it all looked seamless, and the color match between the caulking and the grout was really good. In all, it took me more than a month of nights and weekends to see the entire floor through from start to finish, and I will be the first to admit I'm not very fast. But I'm really happy with the fact that I took on this project myself, and I'm happy with the result. Anyway, I hope this tutorial will help some other DIYers out there take on this kind of project, and thanks for watching.